Good evening, everyone. I'm here in the pulpit because my handheld mic, the batteries are dead, and I told him it would be better than taking his mic off and putting it back on him. So welcome, everyone, tonight. We're glad you could be with us for this session of the Marion Smith Speaker Series. With us tonight is the Reverend Dr. John Switzer. He is a native Mississippian with more than 30 years of award-winning teaching. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and Philosophy from St. Joseph Seminary College in St. Benedict, Louisiana, a Bachelor of Sacred Theology from the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome, a Master of Arts in Religious Studies from Loyola University in New Orleans, an interdisciplinary PhD in Theology and Education from Boston College in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, a certificate in missiology and ecumenism from the Boston Theological Institute. The Reverend Dr. Switzer is an emeritus professor of theology at Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama, and currently serves as rector of St. Pierre Episcopal Church in Gautier. I have to ask you that, John. Is it Gautier or Gautier? Gautier. Gautier. The author of articles on faith for several magazines, he has been a popular speaker in parishes throughout the Southeast. The Reverend Dr. Switzer serves as ecumenical and interreligious officer for the Episcopal Diocese of Mississippi, is chair of the Mississippi Board of Examining Chaplains, and is editor of our diocesan newspaper, the Mississippi Episcopalian. He and his wife, Patsy, live in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Please join me in welcoming the Reverend Dr. John Switzer.
Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. Can hear? Okay. All right. You know, when I was young, I used to be so impressed with those kinds of introductions. Now that I'm this age, I just think it means I'm old. I've done a lot of things, right? Well, listen, I am a Benedictine oblate, which means that while I'm not a monk, I'm a person who tries to live by Benedictine values that are expressed in the rule of St. Benedict. So we cannot begin until we pray, because one of the central tenets of the Benedictine rule and the life of the Benedictine monk, and oblates as well, is that this is a quote from the rule, absolutely nothing is more important than prayer. And that's pretty certain to me. So I'd like us to recite together a psalm, if we could, Psalm number 139. In your prayer book. It's begins on page 794. And as our conference progresses, you'll probably make the connection. Oh, I think I know why he chose that psalm. Page 794, Psalm 139. And let's do something fun this evening. We'll let the ladies take the odd verses, and the gentlemen take the even-numbered verses. Shake it up a little bit. One of my parishioners does this. First time she did it, I was like, oh, that's cool. So she does it a lot now. So ladies, would you begin with verse 1 for us? You trace my journeys and my resting places, and are acquainted with all my ways.
Indeed, there is not a word on my lips, but you, O Lord, know it altogether.
You press upon me behind and before, and lay your hand upon me.
Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain to it.
Where can I go then from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?
If I climb up to heaven, you are there. If I make the grave my bed, you are there also.
If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea,
even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand hold me fast.
If I say, surely the darkness will cover me, and the light around me turn to night.
Darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light to you are both alike.
For you yourself created my inmost parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb.
I will thank you because I am marvelously made. Your works are wonderful, and I know it well.
My body was not hidden from you while I was being made in secret and woven in the depths of the earth.
Your eyes beheld my limbs, yet unfinished in the womb. All of them were written in your book. They were fashioned day by day, when as yet there was none of them.
How deep I find your thoughts, O God. How great is the sum of them.
If I were to count them, then there would be more in number than the sand. To count them all, my lifespan would need to be like yours.
Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. You that thirst for blood, depart from me.
They speak despitefully against you. Your enemies take your name in vain.
Do I not hate those, O Lord, that hate you? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you?
I hate them with a perfect hatred. They have become my own enemies.
Search me out, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my restless thoughts.
Look well whether there be any wickedness in me, and lead me in the way that is everlasting.
Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. And then this prayer is one of the thanksgivings in the back of the Book of Common Prayer. It's one of my favorites in the entire prayer book. It's a thanksgiving for the diversity of races and cultures. O God, who created all peoples in your image, we thank you for the wonderful diversity of races and cultures in this world. Enrich our lives by ever-widening circles of fellowship, and show us your presence in those who differ most from us, until our knowledge of your love is made perfect in our love for all your children, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. I'm so happy to be here this evening. Father Ken approached me about the same time he became your rector. So we've been talking about this for a long time, for about 5 years. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for being here this evening. Let me also say that I know a lot of folks, when they find those difficult passages in the Psalms, they leave them out, and that is an option for us. And sometimes I leave them out if you saw those last few verses, huh? Slay the wicked. Get them, God. Most of the time, though, I like to leave them there because they make me think. They challenge me. They give me a hard time in prayer, and I think that's one of the things we want in prayer, right? Is to struggle with difficult things. Did everybody get a handout? Okay. Just that one, yeah, just one handout. And thank you to the gentleman who passed them out for us. Thank you, sir. So this is pretty cool, this conference idea here at Trinity. And the way I think of this conference is we're in a journey, okay? We're here, and we're hopefully going here, or there if you prefer. So here represents who we are right now and what we think about some things. And I'm going to throw some ideas at you and some challenges at you to get you thinking, and we'll see at the end where you'll be then in terms of some of the ideas coming at you. Now, I want to really emphasize this word thinking. The world desperately needs people who are willing to put the hard work in to think. We've become a world that often does, I think, often doesn't want to think, and thinking is hard work. When you do it well, I don't just mean ruminating. Oh, look at that pretty flower. Thinking and thinking deeply. I can promise you most of my students at the college didn't do it. And yet that's ostensibly why they were there, to become better thinkers. But sadly, for most of them, it was just a rite of passage. Now, I think that Samuel Clemens was right when he said some people would rather die than think. Most do. Why? Because it's difficult. When we think, we have to challenge some of the presuppositions we have, some of the ideas we have. When we think, we sometimes have to go to others and get input, right? Get some wisdom from somebody, which is difficult at times because it's hard to admit, I thought I already knew it. When I teach a graduate course for the college, periodically, one of my older students, I don't mean older, but somebody 30s, 40s, in other words, they're well into adulthood, would actually get upset with me for questioning what they thought they knew. Now, I'm a pretty gentle guy. When I question, it comes with all sorts of pats on the back and you're doing great. But let me challenge you on this. That thinking, when people get challenged, they don't always respond well, do they? But thank you for being here, because that's what you're here to be tonight and tomorrow. Challenged a little bit. Thinking is an important part of the process of getting to the truth. How much thinking did the disciples have to do? I know I'm driving this gentleman crazy because he's having to move around. Let me pick a spot and stay cemented here. How much thinking did the disciples have to do? We see examples, right? Are you the Messiah? Tell us. Got to think about that. And then I can decide, do I accept this or do I not accept it? And if you're the Messiah, why? Why should I accept that you're the Messiah? And I think that thinking and learning to think well, learning to think effectively, learning to think deeply can be a way to enrich the experience of being human. Now, I don't mean to imply that thinking is the only thing that will enrich being human. But I'm looking at you, and you're all human. Right? One of the first, maybe the first job of a good teacher. Any of you teachers? Great. You see what you think of this. I think probably the first job a teacher has to do is not even to do the lesson plans of what's being studied, but to figure out the hook. How am I going to get these kids convinced that they should study what I'm inviting them to study? So my hook tonight, we're not really studying in a traditional manner, but my hook to you, and since you didn't have to be here, it can be a little hook, right? My hook to you is what we're going to talk about tonight and tomorrow. It's all about you because you're all humans. So I think the fact that you showed up, you have an interest in this. And you'd like to think a little bit about enriching the experience of being a human being. John chapter 10, verse 10. I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. So when we enrich ourselves in our understanding of what it means to be human, I believe with all my heart that the fullness of life will become a reality as Jesus was speaking. I'm convinced of that. Because this is one thing I know we all share. We may not all be in the same political party. We may not all have the same background experiences. We may not all think the same way about all sorts of things. But we are all humans. Now, as we get into our conversation along the way, I thought it would be good to talk about my presuppositions. Because you might hear some things, I hope you hear some things you've never heard before, some approaches you've never heard before. And you may say, well, where did that come from? So I just want to lay them on this is not everything, but this is lucky 13. There are 13 presuppositions that form a sort of a foundational base for what I'd like to propose to you. Number one, grace is a universal reality, and humans have a radical capacity for it. Now, we use that word grace a lot. And if you ask most Christians to define it, they're going to go, I'm not sure. It's one of those kind of words. So let's use a simple definition. Grace is God's presence and assistance to us. So what I'm proposing here is that God is present everywhere and in all things and can work through all things. Big word, all. 3 letters, big meaning. And it leads to number 2. Every created thing can provide an experience of God. Every created thing. Jesus taught us this, right? Things are not evil. What we do with them can be evil. Number 3, everything authentically human. This is going to be challenging for some of you. Everything that is authentically human is also holy. The secret there is authentically human. St. Irenaeus of Lyon, a 3rd century bishop, said, the glory of God is a human person fully alive. Whoa. He didn't say the glory of God is a sinner on the floor begging forgiveness. The glory of God is when you are fully alive. That's a powerful, powerful statement. Number 4, we humans are hermeneutes. Isn't that a great word? It means we practice hermeneutics. It means we're meaning makers. We're going to talk some more about that. We make meaning of our experience, and in the midst of that meaning making, we work with God, we cooperate with God to make a better world. Number 5, I say this to myself all the time. Humans are imperfect and fallen and sinful. It's amazing how much peace can come to your daily life if you will integrate that into all your experiences. Humans are imperfect, fallen, and sinful. We say it all the time, but do we really take it to heart? You are broken, sinful, fallen. I am broken, sinful, fallen. So why the hell are we so surprised when we upset each other? I thought you were an angel. I'm not an angel, and neither are you. But we are not entirely corrupt. Now, some of our brothers and sisters who come from fundamentalist churches believe in something called absolute depravity, which means until you get saved, there is nothing good or worthy in you or your actions. We Episcopalians reject that wholeheartedly. Because despite being sinful, we were made in the image and likeness of God. And our sins are not God's fault. Our sins are because we abuse the freedom which has been given to us by our Creator. Number 6, all human institutions. Next time you're having a political debate with a member of your family, remember this. All human institutions being created by imperfect people are also imperfect, and therefore there's always a need to better them and reform them. There is no perfect political party. There is no perfect church. By the way, if you find it, please don't join it because you'll ruin it. Okay? Nothing human is perfect. God's presence in the church is perfect, but anything we are responsible for is not. Even doctrines can be better formulated from time to time. Number 7, we are called by Christ to love who? Everyone, especially those who are overlooked by our institutions, which are imperfect. Because institutions are made of groups of people. So when groups of people overlook someone, then that overlooking is not just one person overlooking another, it's a big overlooking. And so Jesus invites us, when we see people who are being overlooked and whose needs are not being met, to step in and help. And sometimes the best way to help is not just to give them $10. Sometimes they need mentoring. Sometimes they need help getting resources. Here, one of our big problems, I think, as Christians, is the word love gets used the wrong way, too. Now, I think of this sheet, by the way, I called it a handout, but my favorite name for it is refrigerator theology. So I want you to take it home, use those cute little magnets and put it on your refrigerator and look at it occasionally. Because you're going to fall in love. The more you think about this definition of love here from Father William O'Malley, you're going to fall in love with it. I have students from over 20 years ago who call me and email me, remind me that definition of love. Well, what do you need it for? I'm married now, and I'm trying to figure out what love is in the context of a marital squabble. Or I have children now, and I'm trying to find out how to love. What is love when they've made you completely crazy? Listen to this. Love is a conscious, active commitment to the well-being of another human being. Whoa. Love is a conscious, active commitment to what's best for someone else. It's not a feeling. It may be accompanied by feelings. Some of them may be very strong. But the love Jesus is talking about is a commitment to someone else's well-being. Through my years at the college, it was not uncommon for men or women to show up in my office weeping. I mean, when you get a 19-year-old football player crying in your office, you know, whoa, this is serious. So pull out the Kleenex. Something big is going on in their life. Something like, I remember one case, this young man said, my roommate is spending all of his time doing drugs and drinking, and I really care about him. I don't know what to do. I said, well, you got to do something. He said, what if you told the proper authorities here at the college? And they went to him and said, you got to get help. Oh, I couldn't do that. He would be so mad. Oh, you don't love him. What do you mean I do? I love him a lot. I said, no, it sounds to me like you don't. Remember that definition of love we learned in class? It sounds to me like you're more worried about his response to you than you are about his well-being. I mean, doesn't it sound that way to you? Or did I read it wrong? He agreed. I don't know whatever happened, but he agreed at the time. Number 8, our lives will be richer if we are open to the truth no matter where it's to be found. St. Augustine of Hippo said, all good and true Christians should know that truth, wherever it is to be found, belongs to their God. Truth is truth. Number 9, we were called into creation by God, who is loving and seeks the fullness of relationship with us. Jesus Christ is the relationship maker. The Son of God became human so that we might become God, according to St. Athanasius of Alexandria. Now, he wasn't speaking literally, but when he said Jesus became human so we could become God, what he's saying there is that we will have many of the characteristics of God because we will live forever in the presence of God. Number 10, God desires everyone to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. That's from 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 4. Being human, all right, now we're going to start doing the human stuff here in a serious way. Being human is intimately linked to salvation. Did you know that? Just being human, you're already linked to God's desire for your salvation. How do we know that? Because Jesus became human. Where does the salvific work of God begin? with the humanity of Jesus. So the two are intimately linked. And we Christians sometimes run from that humanity. We run. Well, I'm broken, I'm sinful. Don't run from your humanity. Don't run from your sinfulness. Don't run from your mistakes and your fallen nature. Embrace them and give them to the one who came to save humanity, you included. We are saved through these human experiences, not by running away from them in fear. Probably one of the biggest things Christians often do in prayer is we don't want to be honest with God. We don't want to say those things to God about things we've done, the things we've thought, how we've treated our neighbor, the thing we should have done and we didn't do. We're okay with saying we're sinful. Most merciful God, I confess to you. But when we're alone, we need to say, this is me, Lord. This is me. Not for God. God knows it already. For the sake of an honest relationship. The best relationships for humans with each other and with God are honest relationships. Number 11, salvation, and this is linked to the previous one. Salvation is not about just getting to heaven. It is so much more. It starts here, and the fruits of salvation can begin to be experienced here. By the way we are being human. Can't be saved if you're not human. Not in the traditional Christian sense. There are theologians who say that animals will have a place in the kingdom, and I'm fine with that. But we don't really call that salvation. Can't be a Christian if you're not a human. Can't be saved if you're not a human. Number 12, the cosmos is user-friendly, and you belong here. From the Christian perspective, you're not an accident. You were created by a loving God who wants a relationship with you in your humanity. And finally, the church is called Catholic because it exists for everyone and has a relationship to everything. It comes from two Greek words, kata, meaning according to, and holos, meaning the whole or the entirety. The church is part of God's plan for the created order. The church is part of the world and has a relationship with the whole world. Did any of those, was anybody particularly struck by any of those? Or angered? Maybe you found one troubling. Yes, sir.
So would you say that Jesus in his humanity is perfection?
Oh, yes, I would. And you'll hear that theme in our conference. I would argue, when people tell me, well, to sin is human, I tell them, no, it's a refusal to be human. So we were created by God who had an idea of a full relationship with us. It's when we're running from God and running from that relationship and running from our humanity, see, that we sin. The traditional teaching, and I know there are many people who would tell you, oh, the traditional teaching doesn't make any sense. We need to jettison that. We need to get rid of it. That would be foolish. The traditional teaching worked out over several centuries in the early centuries of the church was that Jesus is fully human and fully divine. Not 50-50, 100-100. That's how he establishes the possibility of the fullness of a human relationship with God. Now, you can theologize that in any number of ways, and I love doing that. But I would never want to get rid of that teaching because it's outdated. Do you find that helpful? Now, will you ever be a perfect human being? Traditionally, we say only when you reach the kingdom, right? In the presence of God. Although there were some early theologians in the church, first few centuries of the church, Clement of Alexandria actually said, no, we won't be perfected instantly. We'll be perfected in the eternal abode over time. Either way. Another comment, question, idea? What time do we end? 7:30. Okay. All right. Stick that on your fridge. Read it once in a while. Or read one a day and think about it. Or stick it in your Bible or your prayer book where you can use it in your own prayer. Now, if you've noticed something, you might have picked up that I have staked a lot on being human for this conference. A lot. Why? Because you can't be fill in the blank without being human. Yeah. It's the only way. That's right. Now, I think that's significant. We are a special part of the created order. And I think if we had a better sense of that, it could enrich us. We're going to be looking at 4 questions during our time together. What does it mean to be human? That's what we're doing tonight. What does it mean to be religious? We're also hopefully going to do that one tonight. And then tomorrow we're going to ask, what does it mean to be Christian? And what does it mean to be Episcopalian? Because I'm convinced that all of these can enhance our appreciation of our humanity. And as we enhance that, and as we grow to understand that the closer we become to God, the better human beings we are, I think that's important. Yes, sir.
I asked a priest one time, I said, if and when Jesus says, be ye perfect, what does that mean? He said, it means being perfectly human.
This gentleman and I would be right together. Yeah. His theology and mine would jive very. Are you comfortable with that? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Yep. And what's the only? Listen, Scripture calls us. Father Ken and I, and Father, what was your name again? Father Jeffrey. We're ordained priests. But before we were ordained priests, we were members of the priesthood of all the faithful. All of you are members of a priesthood. It's called the baptismal priesthood. Now, what do priests do? What makes a priest a priest? Cool clothes, yeah. Hot. In August, they can be very hot on a Sunday. The essence of any kind of priest, Hindu priest, any kind of priest, is to offer sacrifice. That's what a priest does. As originally we didn't call them priests, we called them presbyters, presbyteroi in Greek. But as sacrificial overtones were attached to the Eucharist, the church began referring to the presbyters as priests. But you're a priest. So what is it you're supposed to offer? Where's your altar? And what are you supposed to put on that altar, right? An altar is a table where you put things given to God. So where's your altar and what are you supposed to put on it? Thank you. The sacrifice of yourself. And yourself is a human being. And where's your altar? Well, it depends on what you're doing. If you're driving to the hospital to see a sick friend, your altar's your car. If you're making love to your spouse whom you love dearly, your altar is your bed. If you're changing diapers, your altar is wherever you've got the baby. And it can all be given to God. All of it. Even the broken parts. Especially the broken parts. Right? Also, as we get into this stuff. You don't have to believe me. I hope you will. I hope it'll make sense to you and it will enrich you. But part of being human is that you are free to say, no, I think he's wrong about that. As long as you have a good reason. Okay? That's what it means to be human. We disagree from time to time, or it's one of the things. All right? So thanks for being with me on this journey. Now, I want to ask the first really big question. And it's harder than you think. But don't hesitate, okay? I'm not going to shoot you down. What is it that constitutes a human being? That's a big word, constitute. What is it that constitutes a human being? In other words, what is unique about a human being that is so unique no other creature on the planet shares it? I'm sorry? A soul, okay. That's part and parcel of the full answer. So good, all right, we're on the right track. That's part of the puzzle, a soul. Because a soul implies a special relationship with God. Ooh, you are fast. He is yes, conscience, reasoning. Let me propose to you that this is just another way to say these things. What makes a human being a human is something we do that, as far as we know, no other creature on the planet does. Meaning making. It was number 4 on your list. Meaning making. Hermeneutics. Hermeneutics, of course, in theology classes we use it in different ways, but hermeneutics is for the sake of simplicity, hermeneutics is the art of interpretation. Okay? You and I are constantly interpreting our experience. We are constantly asking questions like, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? What does it mean that it happened? How do I have to respond now that it happens? Why am I here? And perhaps for most of us, probably the biggest one, what happens when I die? You see, you and I have cognitive abilities that are far advanced over the other creatures of the planet. They have experiences too, don't they? They eat, they drink, they run around, they make noise. But as far as we know, we don't see any evidence that they are trying to interpret what happens to them. And it's because we have consciousness, as you said. We are self-aware. My little dog, Fabio, full of energy, he's not self-aware. And what does it mean to be self-aware? It means that you know that you know. He knows a lot of stuff. He knows when to come to dinner. He knows when he's hungry. He knows how to get me up out of my chair and feed him. He's a bright dog. But he doesn't know that he knows. And he's not he doesn't have the higher cognitive ability to interpret his experiences. Had a student once who said, I have 4 or 5 dogs, and one of my dogs died, and the other dogs were mourning. Now, this was in a class, so they wanted to talk about it. I said, were they mourning? Were they interpreting the experience of their fellow dog's death? I don't think so. They intuitively sensed that something was different, and they may have reacted to that. But if they really knew that their pal, Fluffy, was dead, you would see ritual behavior. The dogs would dig a big hole, or they'd light a fire they'd learn how to embalm, they'd all get down on their doggy knees. you'd find some kind of ritual behavior to mark the experience. They don't have the capacity for that. Now, we say all sorts of anthropomorphic things about our pets, don't we? Oh, my dog is smiling. No, your dog's not smiling. Your dog is doing something with his or her mouth that you think, that you interpret as a smile. Exactly. Exactly. Hermeneutics. Higher cognitive ability. Evolutionary biologists tell us it's one of the reasons we're at the top of the food chain. Because we have, yes, sir. You've lost. Okay, which part? Where did we take the wrong turn on this journey?
Well, we have 4 dogs.
Good. God bless you.
And they know when we're walking out the door
Sure.
and not coming back. Is learned experience, I mean, have they not interpreted that?
I think I wouldn't be comfortable calling it interpretation, because interpretation requires a certain amount of higher cognitive ability that their brains simply don't show evidence of. But what I do think is that it would be much more related to what Pavlov taught us about animal behavior and what animals pick up on. Mine does too. He can tell, Fabio knows when I'm getting up out of my chair to get a refill of wine, and he just sits there and looks at me. I don't know what the difference is, but he knows, oh, Daddy's getting up to take me walking. How the heck does that dog know? They can't read my mind, but there's something about the way I'm moving, or
Isn't that interpreted?
you could call, okay, I see your point. You could call it that, but I don't think it's really interpretation. I think it's just learned behavior. What did Pavlov call it? You know, when the bird, they'd ring a bell every time the bird was fed, and the bird would turn a little thing in the cage and take a piece of food. So if you want to call that interpretation, that's fine. But I think words are important, and I think there's something we're doing that is so vastly different from what your puppy dogs are doing that I wouldn't want to call it that. But I get your point, and words can be used in more than one way. It's an excellent point. Thank you.
I got stuck now.
Okay. We took a little dirt road for a minute. That's okay. That's how we humans learn. You know, freshmen, their first semester, they just sit there. They don't ask anything. They don't say anything. They're not learning, probably. They're not learning as well as they could. Let's put it that way. The learning mind is the mind that probes and goes back and forth like the ping pong ball. Because you were interested in that question, so you had to pursue it, and it has enriched your ability to think about this.
Well, they called it conditioning.
You mean Pavlov? Was that the term he used? Okay, yeah, I couldn't remember that word. Does that make sense? I mean, we may not all agree, but I think something a little different is going on.
That's a fine line.
Okay, I can live with that. But theologians, we live for fine lines. Yep. By the way, do you know the difference between a philosopher and a theologian? Philosophers build castles in the sky. Theologians live in them. So, my argument here then is that higher cognitive ability makes it possible for us to think symbolically. Now that, I guarantee you, your dog can't do. To think symbolically. When you come to church on Sunday, how many phrases are used during 1 hour of worship that is symbolic and figurative? Think of all the things we say about God and eternal life and salvation. I mean, you can't go to any paragraph of the Gospels. I am the living water. No, you're not. You're a first-century Jew. Of course he's the living water. Figurative, symbolic language. See? We can take ideas from the cloud, right? And pull them down and put them to use for us. And we use it all the time. right? You're talking to somebody, I don't get it. You know, it's kind of like, oh, I get it. You take one thing and use it to talk about another thing. You can't talk about God without it. How big is God? How well do you understand God? You can't make a circle that small, okay? The distance between us and God, in terms of magnificence, not in terms of love. That distance has been conquered by God, I mean. But the distance between us and God is insurmountable. So we have to have symbolic words to talk about God. That's why I think religious fundamentalism of any type is just not helpful. So we think symbolically. We are able, with our higher capacity, to do creative things in exalted ways. You're going to have the Alleluia chorus here soon. It's going to be in the newspaper this month. I talked to the editor. He assured me it made it in. Wow, that's beyond human, it seems, isn't it? And yet it is. It's human. We have the ability to write the most complicated and expressive paragraphs. Think about what writing is. You take something here, you put it down like that, and then you give it to somebody, and they know what you were thinking. Wow! Magic, huh? From here to there. All of this is related to being human. It is being human. And all of these are forms of interpretation. Interpretation happens all the time. You never stop interpreting. You didn't get up this morning and say, gosh, it's a great day to interpret my experience. You just do it. You do it naturally. It's another part of the fact that it's constitutive of being human. You even do it when you sleep. How do I know that? Because you should demand proof for all of these statements I'm making. I'm trying to give it to you, but how do I know you interpret your experience when you're asleep? Dreams. When I first became a professor, I had this recurring dream. I would show up in class in my pajamas. It was insecurity. Somebody's going to realize I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I had the same dream for 6 months when they ordained me, but I was behind the altar in my pajamas. Not only was it a new job, right? It's a new identity. To me, I'm thinking. I quickly realized, okay, this is just my insecurity, and it was so refreshing to say that to myself. Give yourself permission to be human. Now, let me propose that in our meaning-making exercises, let me propose that there are 3 mega tools. At least 3. These are the 3 I came up with. There are 3 mega tools we humans use in our meaning-making. 1, philosophy. Philosophy is an organized meaning-making tool. 2, religion. Religion is an organized meaning-making tool, a hermeneutic tool. And believe it or not, culture is a meaning-making hermeneutic tool. All 3 of these tell you things about the meaning of life, what constitutes a good life, ontology. What's ontology? That's the study of being, the status of things that be. Where do they be? How do they be? Did they be before they were here? Will they continue to be after they were here? Okay? Morality, which is what we should do and what we should not do. Do this, don't do that. And death. And a million other things. The meaning of life. meaning of life, good life. Oh, the three tools? Philosophy. Philosophy, religion, and culture. These three organized systems for hermeneutics, for meaning making, are so vital and so important that when you send a kid to a liberal arts college, the curriculum's loaded with these. Now, I specifically say liberal arts. There's a debate in our culture about should you get a liberal arts degree or should you go to a technical school? That's a hermeneutic thing everybody's got to face individually. But what is the value of the liberal arts education? It's to help people learn to think and to think well and accurately and deeply. In other words, it's trying to turn people not just into, well, they're already meaning makers, but to help them to be good meaning makers, because guess what? You knew it was coming, right? I know somebody's already thought it. All meaning making is not of equal value. Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine is an example of where he decided to go with his meaning making. Now, I'm sure there are elements in his meaning making that are quite reasonable, and I've been told by historians there are some concerns in this relationship that he's got valid concerns. Okay, great. But why do thousands of people have to die for his meaning making vision, and why do millions have to be displaced? So I might be willing to argue that the end game for his meaning making on that topic could have been a lot better. Yes, sir.
So would you include psychology?
Yes, we could put that there, but psychology is the study of, well, I guess so. I was thinking it was more of how we make meaning-making decisions, right? But yeah, we could. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it all starts right here. You know, we're talking about thinking, right? Freud said everything happens for a reason. And I guess in human behavior, it all starts here. These are my favorite three, though. But that's a great question. By the way, the liberal arts, a lot of people don't know what that means. Why is it called liberal arts? It's called liberal arts because it's supposed to liberate us from whatever holds us back from solid, positive meaning making. It's supposed to liberate us from those things that are holding us back from making good decisions, from learning what we need to learn, to make good meaning. We all need to be liberated from something. You're grinning, and what are you thinking? I love that kind of grin. I love it when people nod or when they go, this is even okay. You're thinking. It doesn't matter. You're thinking. If you're thinking, that's what I want.
I have 3 degrees.
God bless you.
But the one that I've gotten the most traction with was the very first one,
What?
which was an Associate of Arts degree in Social Sciences. That one I've used more than any other. The other business economics and sociology.
So, yeah, I would think that'd be very helpful.
And so liberal arts, it's good.
Now, that being said, and you didn't say anything I would ever want to disagree with, but there is a legitimate debate about what should be on the curriculum.
Oh, yeah, that's solely.
Yeah, exactly. There are some things sometimes I'm like, okay, is that really learning or is that what? Exactly. So I don't mean to suggest. All right. How to think well, how to make meaning well. These are all tools in the search for truth. And what did Jesus say? The truth will set you free. That's right, no matter where you find it. It took Augustine to come up with that part, but it was an extension of Jesus' insight. Now, of those 3 tools that I am leaning on, philosophy, religion, and culture, religious colleges are obviously going to read the other 2 through the lens of religion. And it is good that they do that. They should. Now, let me tell you why they should. Those three tools, philosophy, the philosophers, the preachers in religion, the people in our culture, every one of them has radically different answers to the questions we mentioned a few minutes ago. They often have radically different answers to the question of what's a good life. Radically different answers to the question of what's the meaning of life. Radically different answers to the question, how should you live your life and what should you do? Radically different. So who are you going to believe? When life goes to the dogs, who are you going to call? And I don't mean to imply, although my favorite is religion, and I'll tell you why in a second, I don't mean to imply that all religions, just like I said, all meaning-making is not of equal value. I don't think all religions are of equal value, and I don't believe that all religious propositions are of equal value, and I don't believe that all religious activities are of equal value. Now, the reason I think that religion of the three tools is the best, now let me qualify, healthy religion. Healthy religion. There are some very sick religious practices in the world. Why do I think religion is the best of the three? Because religion always points to something transcendent, something out of this world. It may not be a place, it may not be an entity, but it's of value maybe. See? Now, why is that important? Because you have that higher cognitive ability that puts you in touch with what we call the spiritual. You can imagine things that the other animals on the planet that we have no indicators, I'm open to being proved wrong, but we have no indicators that they can imagine things. I mean, how long can you stay underwater without breathing? 10 seconds. And yet, another human being with the same kind of limitations dreamed up the first submarine, and now we have them that go underwater for a year. Nuclear power. How far can you fly without a plane? And yet, a human being with the same kinds of limitations you have imagined flying. Wouldn't it be great if we could fly instead of take a wagon train to California? Whoa. Please. I may have stated it poorly or be out of my mind. Some have said so.
Well, I think that philosophy can also reach the transcendent. Say, Plato's Symposium, envisions, and Plato's whole philosophy envisions a world completely beyond us, that we in our imaginations and our idealism, utopia, about love, that is transcendent of
Yes, sir.
this world. And I think in culture, there are political philosophers who envision worlds of social justice that are way beyond
Sure.
what we have.
Sure.
So I think that I would say I don't think religion is distinguishable in the way that you say from the others, because I don't think it has a monopoly on transcendent
Thank you.
or aspiration.
Thank you. And I actually meant to say that. Religion and philosophy, for instance, at Spring Hill, those two departments constitute the division of philosophy and theology. The philosophy and theology deal with a lot of the same issues. And you are correct. Some philosophers propose transcendent answers. Plato was one of them. Aristotle said no, but Plato said yes, the metaphysical world. You're absolutely right. The reason I zeroed in, and I did not say it correctly, the reason I zeroed in on religion is that my understanding of religion is that religion always points to something transcendent, whereas philosophers are hit and miss. If you're an atheistic, nihilistic philosopher, but you know what's interesting about that? Even the nihilist philosophers sometimes can be transcendent. Because what they tell you is, you got to build a world of meaning around the nihilism that transcends the limits of nihilism. We can't help ourselves, can we?
We can't. You'd have, and nihilists say you'd have to have the courage to transcend the death of God.
Bingo. Bingo. It's part of us. Now, I also don't mean to imply that non-religious people are problematic. That's, but as we're going to be talking about religion in a few minutes, and we'll see what you think of that. Thank you. I like your interjection there.
Part of religion referred to as a
Map, I've never heard that.
said
Really? What does she mean by mapping?
well, a direction, you know back to the transcendent, a direction, a map, a path.
But philosophy does too, is a form of mapping, but it may or may not be transcendent in what it's sending us to, right? It's interesting. I've never thought of that. Thank you. Might have to dig out some Underhill and get back to that. All right. Are we having fun yet? Does anybody want to stretch? You want to get up for a minute? Do we need to take a break or just move around a minute? And you're welcome to do that at any time. I mean, you're not going to insult me if you get up and stand around. You won't even insult me if you leave, but I hope you won't. Everybody's good? I know, listen, the mind can absorb only as much as the rear end can endure. So, especially in pews, but you've got cushions. My church doesn't have cushions. So let's talk a little bit. Let's move then. What I've been trying to share with you is some thoughts, obviously, not perfect, broken, fallen, sinful, about what does it mean to be human. And I think for me, the primary one, the constitutive one, the one that makes us human, is that we are meaning makers. Hermeneutes. Hermeneutes. A hermeneute is a person who does hermeneutics. You're all hermeneutes. So go home and tell a friend tonight, did you know you're a hermeneute? You might get slapped, right? And then you can point to the dog at your house and say, Switzer says you're not a hermeneute. I think you are. By the way, there is some studies now. Some scientists and some anthropologists are beginning to wonder if the higher apes have interpretive abilities. We will see where that science goes. But we have anthropologists and zoologists have put cameras, motion detection cameras in the forest. And they have caught some of the higher apes doing what looks like ritual behavior. They grab a rock and they run at this particular tree and they throw the rock at the tree and the rocks pile up and they scream and yell like they're going to war. And some say that's not ritual behavior. Others say it sure looks like it. We don't know what it means. If we find out it's ritual behavior, I'm going to have to redo this whole thing. So let's talk about religion then. Robert Bellah was an Episcopalian who studied human religiousness. He was a member of All Souls Parish in Berkeley, California. He just died a couple of years ago. He came up with something called the stages of human religiousness. And this is why I asked Father Ken for a board. He proposed that there are a number of stages to how religion has developed and changed in human experience. Now, as we go through these stages, I'm going to do my best to describe them to you, and I want you to notice that as I go from stage to stage, I'm not going to move linearly. We're not going to go this stage, then we go to this stage, then we go. We're going to be like an onion with layers. Because as each stage develops, according to Bella, the previous stage is still there. So the next stage becomes another option that was not possible because humans hadn't come to understand it. They had not yet interpreted their experience in such a way that they had that option. So stage 2 means we got 2 kinds of religion. Stage 3 means we got 3 kinds of religion. Stage 4 means we got 4 kinds. And all of them are still with us. Okay? The first stage, and it's right at the heart. Forgive me, some people will find this term offensive. He used the term and he did not intend anything offensive, and I'll explain it to you. Primitive religion. Primitive religion. The name comes from Latin, and also the word comes from Latin and also from French, meaning the very first or the very earliest. So when Robert Bella said these are primitive people, he didn't mean, oh, those silly primitives. He meant the first peoples. Okay? And I can assure you, if you are ever lost in the Amazon, you will pray for a person that you might think would be a primitive person. There's tremendous wisdom among these folks. Now, what do you think the first human being, whoever that was, the mythology of Genesis says it was Adam, but that's religious mythology, okay? Let's admit that. One of the things I tell my people at my church all the time, everything in the Bible is true, but it is not all historically accurate. What you got to do is say, what's the truth being explained here? Okay? So, what do you think the first person who ever got seriously sick thought about their situation or the cause of their situation? An amoeba? Did they go, oh, I think I got an amoeba in my stomach? Mm-mm. Yeah, they probably did. Okay. And if they thought they were going to die, what did they think the cause of the sickness and perhaps their impending death? Where'd that come from? Oh, I'd like to change this because we weren't there yet to this. What we understand, and the reason Bella proposed this was we can still, not perfectly, but we can still study this stage of religiousness in some of the peoples of the world who are still alive today in South America and Aboriginal people in Australia. Okay? They thought it was a power. They looked around themselves in the world and they saw evidence of powers doing all sorts of stuff. Lightning strikes a tree and the tree catches on fire. There is some power there. The whole world was alive for these people. And these powers could be personal. They could have personalities. Or they could be impersonal. So examples. A personal power for them would be their version of a gremlin, or their version of the boogeyman, or their version of a gnome, or their version of anything like that. They believed that there were these personalities in the natural world, and these personalities could be nice or mean or go back and forth. The non-personal powers would be their version of what we call luck or karma. And they believed that these powers could change their lives for the better or the worse. So when they get sick, who do they call? They call the shaman, because the shaman knows how to deal with these powers. Okay? Now, as of yet, in this stage, there are no gods. No gods, no goddesses, and no worship. They don't worship these powers. What do you think they do? They try to fend them off. They try to do anything they can do to keep them away. This is also the idea of taboo. There may be a better word for it these days. Robert Bellah proposed this decades ago, so terms that anthropologists might not use today, he used back then. So a taboo would be you go to the forest, you pick some mushrooms, you bring them back, and you get sick because you picked the wrong kind of mushrooms and you ate them, and then your whole family gets sick, so your neighbors call the shaman, and the shaman says, "What's wrong? I got sick." "Well, what did you do?" "I ate mushrooms." "Oh," he says. On the other side of the village, there's about 40 people that did the same thing, and they got the same thing. So what are we going to do? Don't go to the forest and pick mushrooms. I mean, it's brilliant. To a person that doesn't have our particular scientific view of the world, it's brilliant. What else do you do? Well, why? Yeah, don't pick the mushroom. But not just because they'll make you sick, because there's some kind of power there that is defending or protecting or guarding the mushrooms. And if you make this power mad, it's going to punish you. And that last part is called, anthropologists call it a meme, because it becomes an insight that the tribe would pass down. Nobody eats these mushrooms because there's a whatever. There's a wicked power who's protective of the mushroom. All right? Oh, by the way, I said there's no worship at this stage. What there is magic. Magic is a way to ward off or to scare or to send away the troublesome spirits.
Thing is, with those mushrooms, you could find the other kind of mushrooms that have this magical power to make you feel.
Yeah. Woohoo! But the problem is, and that is a problem, because they may apply the wicked spirit to all mushrooms. How can you eat steak without mushrooms, right?
So is it always to ward off the power, or is it sometimes to seek?
To do what? I guess if it was a power that was positive, I guess the shaman could call on yeah. In fact, I recently saw Anthony Bourdain, God rest his soul. He bought a chocolate, a field where they grow cocoa beans down in South America, and no one would come work in this, would come help him harvest. None of the local people would. It was away from the city, and they said, "We're not going to work on your land till the shaman comes and does what sends away the bad spirits and calls the good spirits." And that ritual was fascinating to watch the shaman, because Anthony, as the owner of the land, had to be the one to go through the ritual. And it was fascinating. So yeah, it seemed like they were calling good spirits and sending away bad spirits. So the next phase is called archaic, the archaic stage of human religiousness. Now, what you need to know about each stage is it grows as a direct consequence of the previous stage. Things begin to bubble, insights meaning-making begins to happen, and so a new stage comes. But notice, just because we now have the opportunity for a new kind of religiousness, the first one doesn't go away. All right, in the archaic stage, some of those powers become gods. In fact, this stage is called the period of the birth of the gods. Humans are developing their sense of the powers around them, and now they're beginning to believe that these powers are more than just natural powers. They are gods and goddesses who have to be and demand to be worshipped. We're not doing magic anymore, we're worshiping. Now, does magic still, in this stage anyway, does magic still exist? Sure. I know some Episcopalians who believe in magic, especially on football day. Okay? My mother, God rest her soul, was trying to sell her house. She had me help her. We buried a statue of St. Joseph under the for sale sign in the front yard. That's pure magic. Now, did it bother me? No. At least it's its source is an understanding of magic. For her, it was a statement of faith. And she thought the Lord would help her get that house, so it didn't. But I wish it had. I wish it had. It's a development of these powers. They're now turning into gods and goddesses. Now, primitive people, so-called primitive people, are very close to the land. They know the land. They understand the soil, right? So the gods and goddesses in the archaic stage are also attached to the land. What did Yahweh give to his chosen people? The promised land. Psalm 137. Yeah, milk and honey. Psalm 137. The Jews go into exile in Babylon. In Babylon, on the banks of the rivers, we hung up our harps because we cannot sing the song of the Lord in a foreign land. Why? He's not there. He's back. That's right. He's back in the land he gave us. That's where Yahweh hangs out. It was so deeply ingrained in ancient archaic religion. You're going to love this. When the Romans would besiege a city and they were having a hard time getting in, they would find out who the chief god of the city was, and they would set up an altar to the chief god, and they would say, if you let us conquer your people, we'll treat you better than they did. And at this time, the reason I could say what I said about Judaism is that the Jews were henotheists. They were not monotheists yet. Judaism, like most religions, went through a number of developmental stages. Monotheism is the belief that there is one God. Polytheism is the belief that there are many gods. Henotheism is the belief that, yes, there are many gods, but there's only one for us. There's only one God for us. Okay? Yahweh, in the early stages of Judaism, was not the only God. He would come to be the only God for them. And it would come about through their experience of Babylon. Because somebody caught on to the idea, well, wait a minute. Why can't we sing this song to the Lord? Maybe our God really is not a God. Maybe our God is the God. And it caught on. And it became the Judaism we know today. But that would take more development. That's not going to happen to the next stage of religiousness, okay? What we're seeing here as we move from one religion to another is not only development taking place, but development based on collective wisdom. As people make meaning of where they are and what they think and what they believe, and that meaning coming to new questions and new problems and new experiences leads to new options. And some would remain in the old option, and some will be in the new option. Increasingly, as time goes by, what happens? The older options become options that are less and less called upon. I mean, there are very few people in the world, numerically speaking, who have a religion that appears to be like this. So the third stage is called either historic or classical religion. Again, it's a development. So let's historical or classical. In the historical or classical stage, we go from gods and goddesses to God. It is in this stage that humans begin to believe that there is one God. It's also called the axial age, because at this time, what's happening is humans are developing a new way of thinking, and this new way of thinking would catch on so tremendously that this new way of thinking has come to be called the axial age, like an axis around which something circles. Because it changed everything. And when I tell you the main characteristics of this age, you'll see why. By the way, it's also not just religious, it's philosophical. Because in Greece, philosophers were coming along and going, there is one ultimate cause to all things, and that cause is transcendent beyond this world. The metaphysical world is the cause of all things here. In India, where they literally have millions of gods, some great Hindu theologians start saying, you know what? There are millions of gods, but all those gods are an expression of the one ultimate reality. In China, one example, Taoism. There is one principle that will bring you harmony and peace. Even Confucianism, which isn't really transcendent in a heavenly sense, Confucianism proposes that there is a way of organizing human society that will bring harmony and peace. Universalism. What's happening is religions and philosophies are now developing a sense that what they teach is not only true, it's the truth. Leading, of course, to religious competition. It happened within the space of 1,000 years. It happened all over the globe. It's fascinating. If you can imagine a globe with a spark of light with a new idea. Greece, the Middle East, where the Jews are saying, Yahweh's not a God, Yahweh is the God. India, China, boom, 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 boom. And it catches on. And just to repeat, what is the main characteristic? There is one ultimate reality, and it is responsible for or influences everything, and in some way has a transcendent nature that is beyond this world. Yes, sir?
These enlightenments in China and India and Middle East, simultaneous, or was it a movement, or?
Over the course of 1,000 years, and we're not sure exactly how it spread from one place to another. Obviously, there was some form of overlap, some form of cross-enrichment. I'm sure somebody has written a tome on that, but I have not read it. But it fascinates me. Now, personally, as a Christian, I'm really comfortable saying this was an expression of God moving humanity to monotheistic belief.
Did it happen with the Incas and the Indians in South America?
They were too early. Well, the beginnings of their culture were too early. By the time they're wiped out, but the reason your question is really good, I think that by the time monotheists got to them, I think it was too late for them, right? I don't know much about Incan. Did they believe in one God, a master God, or a... I don't know, I'm sorry. Multiple gods, okay. I think that's correct. Otherwise, the missionaries would have said, see, they're already worshiping the true God. We just need to correct them on a few problematic points. I mean, that's what Paul did, right?
I'm more familiar with the Mayans, and the Mayans had multiple gods.
Multiple, okay. So, yeah, it doesn't. And maybe because they were separated by whole lot of water, perhaps that's why. So it sounds like they were here, probably began here and then moved here, and then sadly, unjustly, the civilizations are wiped out.
With the Incas, when they saw the white man for the first time, they thought they were Quetzalcoatl, which was their a white-colored god. And so that's fascinating to me that they would incorporate this. Well, it became around they killed most of them, but they interpreted this as one of their gods coming to them.
Wow. By the way, part of one expression that kind of confirms for me this idea that God was moving humanity. Are you familiar with Eucharistic Prayer D? You probably don't use it often because it's so long. I use it at Easter and Christmas. But there is a phrase in that Eucharistic prayer where God is praised for leading humanity so that we could find you. You reached out and led us so that our searching hearts could find you. The last stage, at least that he proposed. There may be another stage some others have proposed, and there will always be new stages. Religion can't stop. It will always continue to develop. The last stage he proposed is the modern stage. Again, it's developed from the previous stage. So here we have the belief that there is, for those who believe in God, there is one God, or those who don't believe in God and are religious, there's one ultimate transcendent reality, or for the philosophers, the same idea. So the next stage, modern religion, is influenced by modern science. And what does modern science say? Modern science says there's no happenstance in nature. Okay? There's a reason for everything. And there's certainly no God who's angry at you and going to burn your house down by striking it with lightning because you did the wrong thing. If your house is struck by lightning, I don't understand that stuff. I'm sorry. There's a buildup of something and then bam, right? If you get a disease that's killing you, it's not an angry power. It's not an angry God. Perhaps you've seen the cartoon, God is sitting at the computer and there's a man walking down the sidewalk and they're lifting a piano into an apartment and the rope is snapping and God's finger is right over the delete button. Science says, no. That's not how it works. It's a horrible vision of God to begin with. But science says, no, that's not how it works. There are reasons of physics for why the rope is breaking. So sickness, hurricanes, tornadoes, aging, death, they all have a reason. Further, science proposes that there are cosmic laws governing the universe. So how do you make a better world? You learn the cosmic laws and you manipulate them so that we can be here at 7:30 at night in a building with light and we don't have to build fires. See? Now, that's a threat to religion at first. The first response to this of many, not all, but many religious people was, oh, this is terrible. It takes away God. It doesn't take away God at all. But it does require a new interpretation of God. Okay? Well, then who made the cosmic laws? God. There can't be a God, there was a Big Bang. Well, who was responsible for the Big Bang? God. So religion develops and religion interprets as we move along down the road. So, it had an influence on religion. Oh, by the way, there was even a Christian group that when they invented the lightning rod, they condemned the lightning rod. You're messing up God's plans. It's been documented. If God wants to strike that house, God has to be allowed to strike that house. You can't reroute the lightning to prevent damage. On the other hand, the scientists sometimes would be just as critical of religion. Some of you who love science may know Pierre-Simon Laplace, born in 1749. He gave a speech to the French king, and he explained all these things, and at the end of the speech, the king said, I forgot which one. It's one of the Louis, huh? Could it have been a Louis? I can't remember. The king says, and where in your plan does God fit? Because he saw the problem, right? And Laplace says, I have no need for that thesis. Don't need him. So it was perceived as a threat to religion. And many have proposed, this is the source of secularism, right? Secularists will tell you, you don't need religion, right? It can't do anything for you. And there have been multiple predictions that religion would end. A former professor of mine, God rest his soul, Peter Berger, a sociologist at Boston University. We're going to be done in about 2 minutes. He described himself as an incurable Lutheran, so he had deep Christian faith. But he even wrote a book saying, religion's on the way out. I hate it, but it is. And then he continued to watch developments, and he had to write another book and say, I was wrong. There's no reason to drive religion away, and you can't. Because we're always reaching for the stars. We're always reaching for some sense of transcendence. Look, everybody believes something. They're not all religious, but we all believe something. Even if you're not religious, you must believe something to get out of the bed in the morning. It may be nothing more than I can have a happier life if I get my butt out of bed and work hard and make money. I can send my kids to college. Great. That's a belief. So beliefs inspire us. But for many of us, the need to express that transcendence keeps religion alive. So, tomorrow, what are we going to do? We're going to talk about what is it today. Tonight we talked about what does it mean to be human and what does it mean to be religious. It means to be constantly seeking some form of transcendence and to be constantly adapting to the world around you so that your religion continues to flourish and to thrive. But we're going to keep going. Tomorrow we're going to talk about what does it mean to be Christian and what does it mean to be Episcopalian. That'll be the hard part. Thank you. We shall see. Thank you for being gluttons for punishment tonight and for coming out.